Welcome back to CrimePod Castle. And welcome to Twisted Love, our series all about crimes of passion. This is episode 12. So this season, we're diving into cases where, love takes a dark turn. And today we've got a story, a real roller coaster, I gotta say, about a guy named Jaswant Singh Gill.
Oh, yeah?
From Punjab, who, on the surface, seemed to have it all. Intelligence, success, a loving partner. But as you'll see, things aren't always what they seem.
Yeah, what really gets me about this case is how fast a seemingly perfect life just unravels. It shows you how complex human emotions are and how close love and obsession can be.
That's it. Jaswant was like the guy everyone respected, known for his work ethic, intelligence, the whole package. Then he meets Simran, and for a while they were the poster couple for true love.
Right, but there's always more to the story. Underneath it all, tension was building. He wanted stability and tradition. But Simran, she was ambitious, wanted more than their small community.
I bet that caused some serious problems.
Big time. And then, well, Jaswant finds out Simran's seeing someone else, Vikram, a charismatic entrepreneur, the kind of guy who represented everything Simran wanted.
So not just a breakup. This was a total betrayal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's where things get dangerous. Instead of dealing with his pain, Jaswant's need for revenge just grew and grew.
So how did that revenge play out? What did he actually do?
On October 12, 2003, he tricked Simran and Vikram. Said he wanted to talk, to find closure, but he was planning something much worse.
He set a trap.
Yeah. Once he had them alone, Jaswant confronted the couple, and all that bottled-up rage exploded.
He attacked them.
He did. Stabbed Vikram fatally. Simran tried to stop him, but got hurt in the struggle, too.
It's awful. Did he at least stay with them, call for help?
No, he ran, left them there. He managed to hide for a week, but the police caught him trying to escape the state. And get this, even when they arrested him, no remorse. He actually tried to justify what he'd done.
No way. Justified it. That's bone-chilling. Shows how twisted his thinking had become.
Totally. It shows how deep his rage ran, how it consumed him. He actually believed he was the victim.
So here we have a man driven by betrayal, obsessed with revenge, commits this violent act, and then feels zero guilt. What happened next? Did the case go to trial?
You bet it did. The trial of Jaswant Singh Gill became huge news in Punjab. Everyone was talking about it. It made everyone ask, what is love? What is betrayal? And what happens when emotions spin out of control?
That's what we need to unpack. I want to hear more about that trial, and I'm sure our listeners do too.
Before we get to the trial itself, I think it's really important to understand what a crime of passion means, legally speaking. You know how it's different from, like, premeditated murder.
Yeah, good point. When people hear crime of passion, they picture someone just snapping, right, like an impulse. But legally, it's more nuanced than that.
Way more. It does involve that heat of the moment thing, acting under extreme provocation. But the key is that provocation has to be so intense, any reasonable person would lose it.
So not just being mad, there needs to be a specific trigger that makes someone lose control.
You got it. And that's exactly what the prosecution and defense fought over in Jaswant's trial. The prosecution said this was premeditated. He planned it.
Because he lured them to that secluded spot.
Exactly. Plus, he showed no remorse later, which made him seem cold, calculating.
Makes sense. But what about the defense? How they spin it?
They said, look, the outcome was tragic. We're not denying that. But Jaswant didn't plan this. He acted in the heat of passion, driven to temporary insanity by Simran's betrayal.
So they were claiming he did it, but wasn't in control of himself.
Right. They painted him as this upstanding guy pushed too far, someone who just snapped under the emotional pressure.
So two totally different stories. Cold-blooded killer versus a man driven to madness. Must have been a tough one for the jury.
It was. They had to weigh all the evidence, the testimonies, and decide who they believed. And remember, this was Punjab, where societal expectations, especially about relationships, are really strong.
Right. You mentioned how those gender roles might have influenced Jaswant. Can you explain that more?
In a lot of cultures, and definitely parts of Punjabi society, there's this huge emphasis on men being dominant, in control of relationships. It's ingrained that a woman's loyalty reflects on the man's honor.
So to Jaswant, Simran's betrayal was personal and brought shame on him and the community.
Exactly. And the defense used that. They said, look, his actions were terrible, but understandable given how he was raised, his rage, the violence. It wasn't just him, it was reflecting those deep-seated societal norms.
That adds another layer to this whole thing. Fascinating.
It does, and that mix of individual psychology and societal influence is what makes crimes of passion so complex, so hard to judge.
So after all that, what did the jury decide?
Well, in 2005, after months and tons of public attention, Jaswant was found guilty. Murder and attempted murder. Got a life sentence, gave some justice to Vikram's family, and I guess closure to Simran, who thankfully survived, but with serious injuries, physical and emotional.
Heavy stuff. That verdict must have been huge for everyone. Jaswant ending up in prison, and Simran having to rebuild her life after all that.
For sure. And Simran's story, it's one we should really think about. The focus is often on the perpetrator, their motives. But this tragedy impacted her life profoundly.
Good point. We've talked a lot about Jaswant, but what happened to Simran? How did she even begin to cope with all that?
It was brutal. Not just the physical pain from the attack, but seeing it all happen, losing someone she was close to, that psychological trauma.
I can't imagine the strength it took to even start healing.
She stayed mostly private, but we know it was a long, hard road. Surgeries, physical therapy. But the emotional scars, those are invisible but so deep.
To witness that, the betrayal, it would shatter anyone.
It did. She eventually decided to leave Punjab altogether.
Makes sense. A fresh start away from all those painful memories.
Exactly. She needed a place where she wouldn't be constantly reminded, to heal, to take back her life.
So Simran, the woman at the center of this, chose to step away from it all, try to start new, shows real resilience,
Yeah.
but also just how deeply trauma can affect someone.
It does. Simran's story isn't talked about as much as Jaswant's, but it's crucial. Reminds us that behind the headlines, the legal battles, there are real people whose lives are forever changed by this.
Powerful reminder. As we finish this part of the deep dive, I'm just struck by the sadness of it all for everyone involved.
I get it. This case brings up so many emotions: sadness, anger, confusion. But it also makes us face some tough truths about ourselves, about our relationships, about the darkness that's possible even in love.
It's not just one man's story, right? It reflects bigger issues we need to talk about, like those harmful ideas about masculinity, unhealthy relationships, and the lack of support for people struggling with these intense emotions. It just hit me. We usually talk about crimes of passion as romantic relationship things. But couldn't this happen in other relationships too? Like with family or close friends even?
Oh, absolutely. You're right on the money there. These intense emotions, the kind that fuel these crimes, they're not limited to romantic love.
So it's not just lovers going wrong, it's any strong connection that turns toxic, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Parent and child, friends, even business partners. If there's that deep bond, that sense of betrayal shattering it,
That can trigger the same kind of response, lead to someone losing control.
you got it. Whether it's a parent feeling betrayed by their kid, or a friend wronged by another friend, even a business partner feeling cheated, it can lead to violence.
That's kind of scary when you think about it. So wrapping up this deep dive into Jaswant Singh Gill's case, what's the lesson here? How do we stop this from happening again, both personally and as a society, I mean?
That's the big question, isn't it? Tough one. But I think first we got to admit we all have strong emotions, good and bad.
It's not about ignoring feelings, but learning to deal with them in a healthy way.
Right. Emotional intelligence, that's what it's called. Knowing your triggers, being able to step back, think rationally, finding good ways to express those feelings. Therapy, writing, talking to someone you trust.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But on a bigger scale, like societal, how do we create a culture where this stuff doesn't happen?
We got to challenge those old ideas about men being tough, not showing emotion, seeing vulnerability as bad. That whole control equals love thing gotta go. We need relationships built on respect, equality, and being open with each other.
Yeah, teach young people, everyone really, how to deal with conflict without blowing up, how to set boundaries, communicate what they need, and ask for help when things get tough.
I'm with you there. It's education, but also support systems. Make mental health care accessible. Create a culture where getting help is a good thing, not something to be ashamed of.
I think that's what we need to take away from all this. Jaswant Singh Gill's story is tragic, but it also makes us think about what we can do better to build a world where love doesn't equal destruction, where it's okay to be vulnerable, and where asking for help is encouraged.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And even though this case is closed, the conversation about it shouldn't be. We got to keep learning, growing, and fighting for a world where healthy emotions are the norm, not the exception.
It's so true. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the dark side of love. Hope it gave you something to think about. If you or anyone you know is dealing with tough emotions, relationship problems, please get help. There are resources out there. You don't have to face it alone.
And as always, if you like this episode, give CrimePod Castle a follow and subscribe. We'll keep exploring the human mind, the good and the bad.
Stay safe out there. Stay curious. and keep those brains working.
See you next time.